friends. I am up in Santa Fe in my parents' yard, hence the kind of lovely juniper tree in the background here. I was here last night for my parents' movie night, and they watched a movie. I think it's called The Velvet Queen. It's about a photographer and a writer who go trekking through Tibet to find a snow leopard. I mean, they find all kinds of animals, and clearly the trip is about more than just the leopard, but the leopard is kind of like the holy grail of the trip. And it was a real, I mean, the whole film was like a meditation. There's this sense of just being in these vast spaces where human beings have rarely ever stepped. Just miles and miles of wilderness, all above 15,000 feet. And there's a whole dialogue that happens between the two adventurers, and one of them is also narrating, and there's a whole dialogue that happens around the nature of humans' connection to nature and what happens when we get out into spaces like that, and how what that does to our perception of our normal lives in cities or in so-called civilized areas. And at the end of the film, they find the leopard. Spoiler alert. And the writer, who's kind of we're sort of seeing it through his eyes. I mean, both of them are pretty central, but we're viewing this experience through his eyes. He's never been on a trip like this before. The photographer has done this dozens of times. So our window into the world kind of has a guide to follow. And he summarizes at the end kind of what he's gotten from this, and the experience of seeing the leopard just kind of blows him away. And he talks about patience. He talks about how patience is not just a virtue, but a super virtue. And it seems to grow out of, he's kind of upfront about, throughout the film, as we watch them, go on these daily treks for weeks on end, the narrator is upfront about his own impatience to see the leopard, find the animal they came for, and or see any animal. He has a kind of, he's transparent to himself about his own impatience. And then at the end, I think the feeling of just being in the presence of such a majestic creature and having all that time truly culminate in that way, lands him in a place where patience is kind of, I think he has a whole new understanding of what that means, and the film manages to transmit a little taste of that. And where this took me, immediately, as soon as I heard him say the phrase, something happened for me where I thought of the way that I play music. And I've been feeling like I've been having some really good success recently in my practice. And primarily it's down to a willingness to slow down and listen to what I'm doing, feel what I'm doing physically through the keys, mentally track what I'm doing, so I'm truly on board the train of the music, as opposed to relying on a kind of muscle memory in my hands, and then inevitably the tiniest little waver can throw me off. Now that's the old way. There's a kind of new sense that I have of an awareness of being in the flow of the music, and having my conscious, my bubble of awareness, sort of tracking the music as it's happening, and the next step, always the next step is on deck. But because it all leads to a sense of security and a sense of, well, patience, basically. And when this phrase came through yesterday, when he talked about patience at the end of the movie, I immediately sort of summarized what I'm doing now, and what I actually think I can still greatly enhance, as basically being a patient approach to practicing. There's a sense of, and I immediately looked at all of the work I've done. It's like my whole life flashed before my eyes. My whole musical life flashed before my eyes, and I just saw everything I've ever done. Well, with a couple of exceptions, but most of my practice I saw as an expression of impatience. Most of my issues with being unable to learn something or play it the way I wanted to, or I was like, oh, it's all down to impatience. That's all. That's what it's all down to. And there's a really kind of profound implication in that about, first of all, it's great to have a practice like music that simply where they'll never lie. It'll always tell us where we really are. It'll always tell us where we are today and what our consciousness is doing today. So if we're being impatient, we will see it if we want to. We can block it out, but it's there for us to witness and respond to if we want to. But there's a larger picture thing, because the conversation in the film goes on about, the photographer, who's the sort of experienced guide in the field, talks about when he goes back to Paris. They're French. If that wasn't evident, when he goes back to Paris, he turns into a different human being, turns into a different person. And what I think the other guy realizes is that he's that other person all the time. The photographer talks about how he has to play a role, and he has to disconnect from himself in many, many ways. He just starts playing a character, basically, until he comes back to some remote area and, goes on these treks for weeks. That's when he really comes back to himself. It made me think, it's, and then looking at my own impatience, it's like it's not that the conveniences of life or the ways in which we've managed to master the world in order to satisfy our desires are bad necessarily. Some of them might be less optimal than others, but that ability and that human accomplishment is not bad. But it's kind of, I liken it to the nature of food nowadays, where our biology is still programmed to consume fat, salt, and sugar in large quantities whenever we come across it, because in nature, in in a non-industrial environment, or even just a non-cultivated environment, non-agricultural environment. Those things are very rare. When we came across those things thousands of years ago, we wanted to stock up on them, and our body needed to have that impulse. Well, we still got that impulse, and now that food is everywhere. And so, of course, it leads us astray in our health. But that's kind of what convenience is too. Convenience is, it's like fat, salt, sugar, and convenience. Because convenience is a good thing. Nobody is saying that we should go back to doing things more inefficiently or less effectively, or in such a way that they take more of our time and we can't devote our time to other things. It's just that there's so much of life that has been convenienced now. So much of it has been packaged, and so much of it is packaged and delivered so effectively, and so with so little need for patience, that if we don't distinctly and consciously practice patience in our daily life, we're going to lose touch with one of the most fundamental aspects of abundance. Patience is, that was the other thing that came through yesterday. Patience is abundance. Abundance shows up right on time. But so it's really only our impatience that is dissatisfied, that feels scarcity. It's only because we have this, I think, it's hard to know this, but I think it's only because I have programming around having so many of my desires satisfied so quickly and so effectively for so long, that the notion of sitting with what is and just waiting is somehow problematic for my psyche. I have to work to do that, and so when I think about like me learning Chopin etudes when I was younger, I just wanted to play them. I'd heard people play them, and I just thought I should put my hands on the keyboard and try to play them. Well, good luck with that, without deeply going into every sound, every vibration, every movement, every harmonic change, every tactile, every arm movement on the piano. How far apart are these notes? Can you close your eyes and make a long leap? What does that feel like? If that feeling's not there when your eyes are closed, it's also not going to be there when your eyes are open, and so you're going to be compensating with your eyes to make up for the fact that your arm doesn't really know the movement. And it was all just an approach that just wanted to get there. So that the willingness to be patient, the willingness to just sit and be and let the world arrive, let abundance arrive. It's like a superpower. It's a superpower that feels like the opposite of a superpower if we're not if we're impatient. So yeah, that's the impact that this film had on me, and it definitely it made me want to go to the piano and just go really slow again. Thanks for watching, folks. Have a lovely day. Maybe I'll do this again tomorrow. I'm up here for another day. What a gorgeous little setting. See you soon. Bye.